Well, this week, ITV is running its landmark mental wellness campaign, Britain Get Talking, and today we're joined by Businesswoman Jo Malone, who is one of those well-known names who is supporting this campaign. Good morning to you, Jo.
Good morning, Ben. Good morning, Kate. I love the fact that you've enjoying wearing your clogs. I thought that was a swear word.
Thank you.
She doesn't need more support, Jo. She's had enough from everybody. They're loving the clogs. The issues of mental health and the idea of ITV's campaign to get Britain talking is such a crucial one right now. We're constantly made aware of the impending mental health epidemic that will hit once eventually everything calms down from COVID, because people have been isolated and people have had to struggle to try and find a way through what are testing and trying times. I know that you've been very open about your own struggles with anxiety and mental health. How did you find that they manifested themselves? When did they strike you, Jo? Because you've been a very successful businesswoman for such a long time, and it would feel like people from the outside would look at it and say, what on earth does she have to feel worried about?
And you know what, Ben? That's exactly what I thought myself. You know, and the things we have to know about mental health, anxiety. So I've never suffered from depression, but I do suffer terribly from anxiety, and it spirals out of control. But somebody once said to me, it's not about being weak, it's about being strong for too long. And you just can't continue with that strength, and you know, the whole thing kind of starts to break down. But for me, anxiety manifested in a very physical way. So I started to get, my vision went. I started to breathe like from my chest the whole time. So I got pins and needles, and life just felt like I was totally alone. So I felt my triggers, so everyone has triggers. My triggers are isolation, are being put in a situation where I can see no end, and loss of control. So those are my three. So I know normally now when those three triggers happen one after the other, and it's not through when I'm going through a crisis, it's not that. I'm the person you want to stand next to in a crisis, because I'm full of adrenaline, I'm full of run, and I'm full of strength. It's after that moment when the adrenaline starts to calm down. That's normally where I will get, I'll have a panic attack.
What you just described as your three triggers there, isolation, no end, and lack of control, is pretty much defining what the whole nation is feeling right now, isn't it? Because of the pandemic. Has it that triggered you having to deal with lockdown, or are you still in the adrenaline phase of that?
I'm still got adrenaline, believe it or not. But you're absolutely right, Kate. And the reason I came on this morning is because the more we talk about this, the more that we make people not feel isolated and alone. So if one person is watching this right now and says, you know what, Jo, I feel that. I've gone through those things. You know, anxiety and mental health put you into a place where you feel that the only person on the face of this earth going through this. And it's just not the truth. It really isn't. And, you know, if a tiger was to come running in through the studio right now in front of you all, you would have two responses. I bet Ben would, you know, wrestle it to the ground and want to fight it. Actually, probably Kate, you would want to wrestle it and fight it, and somebody else would run. But that's exactly what's happened in our world. A big tiger has run into our world in the form of a pandemic. And do we fight it or do we run from it? So that is that is where we are. But if we're all in the same boat together, we can all help each other get through this. And it will end. This is not forever, just like anxiety is not forever.
The irony is that your company, Jo Malone, of course, which you sold years and years ago, and now Jo loves, the oils and the fragrances that are there are exactly what people send to you. I got sent some over this summer to try and relax and calm you. Is that whole process of making, is that part of an escape for you? What do you turn to relieve your anxiety?
So I love to build. You're absolutely right. Just like you do, you love your gardening. I love to build something, and whether it's a candle or I'm cooking dinner, I have to take that energy and do something with it, because there's nothing worse than sitting in four walls and sitting and thinking, you overthink things. So I would say get up and do something. So through the pandemic, I've built everything from candles through to a new kind of business that I'm not sure what I'm going to do with now, but I put all the cogs in motion, and I thought through the whole thing. And so this time for me has not been as devastating as it has been for others. And I really, kind of appreciate that. But you have to fill your time. You can't sit there and just think, and you have to carry on life, because for me, life changes anyway. Whether this pandemic had happened to us or not, life would still have changed. Life was going to be different. It is going to be different when we come out the other end of this. But, there's going to be a lot of things that we're able to pick up, and we have to be ready to build and kind of resume that happiness of life.
It sounds like it's been constructive.
Yeah.
And that you've put the cogs in motion, not the clogs in motion. We're not going to go down the clog route just yet. Jo, stay there if you will, because we want to talk about the fact, and you mentioned it, that Kate, of course, has been your garden. It's been hugely important for you.
Well, you talk about building, because that's the way you go through it. I think for a lot of people, connecting with nature has been incredibly important, and that's been very tough for a lot of people because we've been in isolation.
So tonight,
but I'm lucky enough to have a garden, aren't I?
Yeah, and tonight on Garden as Well, which is a big favourite in the Garraway and the Shephard household, to be fair. Kate makes her starring appearance. She met Joe Swift, one of the hosts, in your garden to talk about the solace that the garden has brought during Derek's illness. Here's a little clip from tonight's show.
Oh, the wonderful Joe, who was so kind and so lovely when we met. Lovely to see you this morning. Thank you for coming to chat to me again. We'll talk about some of the advice you gave me for the garden and what I've done about it first. But I think you've experienced, haven't you, with other viewers of Gardeners World, just how important having that space and what you can do with whatever patch of land you've got or a pot you've got on your windowsill or whatever it is, can be so helpful.
Oh, yeah. I mean, gardening, during lockdown and through the pandemic has just gone through the roof. The minute everyone went into lockdown, my phone didn't stop ringing. Where do I get seeds? Where do I get compost? How do I plant this? How do I plant that? And I think that's one of the huge positives that's come out of this, otherwise disastrous year, really, is that people have connected with nature. And you don't need a big garden. You don't need a garden at all. Indoor plants, windowsills, or just connecting with the trees in your street or your local park or whatever. I think anyone who gardens like yourself, Kate, understands the huge benefits, your mental health, the physical connection with the garden, the connection with the seasons, and it's just such a wonderful thing. It's a very healing thing, as you know.
I think as well.
I thank you for coming on Garden as Well tonight. It's and opening up about your situation and how much the garden means to you personally. So thank you from everybody at Garden as Well.
Yeah, Joe, I was going to say it's a very personal thing as well. Someone's garden, as Kate talks so honestly, and she's been incredible. She's so inspiring to all of us because she's always been so honest about what they're going through. But each of those plants represents a little moment in the last 6-7 months of what we've been going through. And each of those plants is very personal to her and to Bill and Darcy as well. And for you to be walked through it and talked through it and cast a professional, critical eye over it as well I'd imagine is difficult, but also a real pleasure.
No, it's a huge privilege. And when I turn up to people's gardens, they think, oh, everything's got to be perfect. There's a certain way of doing things with gardens. There's a professional here. But that is not what gardening is about. Gardening is about having a go, connecting with your garden, expressing yourself. We all have successes and failures in our garden. And Kate so beautifully and poignantly puts it that, she said to me, in the garden, there is the past, the present, and the future. It's all there in the garden. And I've been gardening a lot the last few days, and that's been sort of resonating with me a lot. I think, listen, gardening is just for everybody on any level. It crosses through so many boundaries, and that's why it's such a wonderful thing, and it is good for one's soul.
So were you impressed then, Joe? More importantly, were you impressed with Kate's gardening ability? Because, I mean, she puts a lot of time and effort into it, but was it a bit shabby around the edges?
No, around the edges is where all the action is. That was my one criticism. I thought if you could get some of the plants onto the dance floor a little bit more, rather than sort of...
Fill the stage,
You've got to fill the stage.
The problem is it's a family garden, and we need the lawn for the kids to cartwheel and roll about and tussle with. But you're right. He also said, I mean, I'm not a great weeder, but you actually said that was fine. Weeds are just lovely plants in what someone else thinks is the wrong place. But he also said that I had packed it all. It was a bit crowded. So I've tried to let things breathe a bit since you've been, Jo. Give it a bit of space, you know.
Okay, you're a very, very good garden. It's a beautiful garden. You've got a fantastic collection of plants in there. And it's, I know, listen, I've had, my kids are grown up now, but you've got to make it a versatile and practical space for the kids at the same time. And it's a nice, generous garden for London as well. I'm rather jealous of it.
You can come over and do a cartwheel anytime.
Oh, but if you do, she'll get you doing weeding and a bit of planting as well, undoubtedly, Jo. Be careful what you wish for. Just if we can go back to Jo, who's still with us. And, of course, Jo, I mean, you know, Jo Malone, you know only too well the importance of scents and smells as well. And I think the one thing that I love about what Kate talks about with growing the vegetables and the taste of the vegetables, but the beautiful flowers and the smell, how evocative that is. And I imagine that is something that you would certainly recommend people, you know, of easing their anxiety, finding a way through difficult times, is to find that, sort of use those senses that we have that we probably don't use enough.
Smelling the rain on the soil, even if you haven't got a flower, just smelling that lovely smell after the rain's been, which we get a lot of, don't we? That can sort of ground you, kind of using all your senses, can't it, Jo?
I think they're like sort of scent memory keys, and they remind us of things that will be again and that are. And, you know, I mean, I don't have a garden. I love a garden more than anything, and I'd love to grow my own vegetables. And, you know, there must be such satisfaction. Who's the guy that's from Strictly, when he said that in his garden he grew his lettuces and Len Goodman. And he said the satisfaction of sitting and eating a lettuce and potatoes that he'd grown, you know, I think that is a really wonderful, and just hearing you, Kate, talk about your garden is just so, you know, I've got such love and admiration for you. I really, really have. And I'm so glad that you found, you know, a real peace of mind, you know, kind of connecting with nature.
Well, it's about life fighting through, and nature undergoes hurdles all the time, doesn't it, and has to find its way round. So it's kind of a lesson for us all.